Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Insight Global, your window into the world's most important developments. In recent months, the situation in the Middle East has once again entered a dangerous phase of rapid escalation. Tensions that seemed to have cooled are now flaring back with remarkable intensity. In Washington and Brussels, analysts increasingly warn that Iran is re-emerging as a central catalyst of instability, reclaiming its position as a key power shaping the region's future through confrontation rather than diplomacy. According to classified intelligence compiled by the CIA and Pentagon, the crisis began spiraling after the massive U.S. and Israeli airstrikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure earlier this summer, a campaign that marked one of the most direct and aggressive military operations under Donald Trump's administration. For the first time in years, Washington took the extraordinary step of targeting and crippling Tehran's critical infrastructure. However, contrary to expectations that such blows would leave Iran paralyzed, its leadership has rebounded with surprising speed and determination. In a matter of months, Tehran has not only repaired significant damage but has also redirected its military doctrine toward sustained, long-term confrontation with the West. At a time when the Iranian army was widely viewed as weakened and demoralized, new reports now point to the opposite. Fresh intelligence leaks suggest that Iran has endured, adapted, and is preparing for a calculated counteroffensive. The Washington Post, citing senior U.S. intelligence officials, reports that Iran may be coordinating a series of attacks against American military and strategic assets throughout the Middle East. The Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, home to nearly 10,000 U.S. personnel, advanced bombers, and critical surveillance systems, appears to be at the top of Iran's target list. This base functions as the nerve center of U.S. operations stretching from Syria to Afghanistan. Any major strike there would represent not only a devastating military blow but also a severe symbolic humiliation for Washington's regional dominance. Sources familiar with classified assessments describe potential multi-phase attacks involving kamikaze drones, cruise missiles, and infiltration teams crossing the Iraqi border. Such a combined strike, if successful, could temporarily paralyze American air operations across the Gulf. Yet what truly worries the U.S. defense establishment is the shadow of China behind this escalation. Reuters, quoting insiders from European intelligence circles, reports that Beijing is quietly backing Tehran, funneling high-precision navigation components and advanced electronic warfare systems through intermediaries. While China continues to project itself as a neutral advocate for peace and dialogue, Western analysts increasingly believe that Beijing is playing a longer, more strategic game. Every step the United States takes deeper into the Middle Eastern conflict distracts it from the Indo-Pacific theater, where China's influence and ambitions continue to expand. This approach fits a well-documented pattern, a deliberate strategy to overextend and fragment U.S. attention across multiple global fronts. As the Financial Times observed, Beijing seems to be encouraging Tehran's escalation precisely to trap America in another draining war of attrition. Following the devastating July strikes, when Donald Trump boldly declared in a White House address that Iran would never rise again, China significantly intensified economic and military cooperation with Tehran. Oil contracts were renewed under secret terms, sanctions were bypassed through indirect trade routes, and new channels for technological and military exchange were opened. Experts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, in Washington describe this as part of a mutual arrangement. Iran receives funding, oil markets, and technological support, while China gains a powerful proxy lever against American interests. Meanwhile, Iranian state media has begun weaving a new narrative, one centered around a coming battle for Qatar. Al Jazeera, citing sources within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, claims that an attack on the U.S. base there would serve as a symbolic declaration that Iran has returned to the regional stage and is now capable of setting its own terms. Although the Pentagon publicly dismisses these declarations as rhetorical bluster, internal classified briefings to Congress tell a far more serious story. Republican Congressman Michael McCaul has warned that U.S. defense officials consider the probability of a direct strike extremely high. Further evidence supports this growing concern. The Guardian recently published satellite imagery showing new fortified positions in southern Iran, along with the redeployment of mobile missile units closer to the Persian Gulf coast. Movements widely interpreted as preparation for a potential large-scale offensive. In Europe, alarm bells are also ringing. NATO leaders convened an emergency session in Brussels last week to evaluate a potential Iranian strike on American and Allied targets. Among the scenarios discussed was the possibility of Hezbollah launching diversionary attacks against Israel, forcing Washington and Tel Aviv to divide their attention between two simultaneous crises. This convergence of tensions has created what many analysts describe as a geopolitical powder keg. A single miscalculation or provocation could ignite a regional war involving the world's most powerful militaries. Tehran, now operating with little to lose and increasing Chinese backing, appears emboldened. Politico reports that behind closed doors, U.S. Central Command has been conducting high-level simulations. One senior general was quoted saying, "We are preparing for the worst-case scenario, a massive, coordinated strike on Al-Udeid." Yet within the Pentagon, opinions are deeply divided. Some strategists argue that a direct retaliatory attack on Tehran would only deepen the conflict, risking the involvement of Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the broader Gulf coalition. Others insist that any hesitation would project weakness. The Trump administration, according to the New York Times, increasingly favors a hardline response. Senior officials are said to be finalizing contingency plans for a swift and overwhelming retaliation, including precision strikes on Revolutionary Guard infrastructure in Syria and Iraq. In Tel Aviv, tensions are equally high. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, speaking to Channel 12, warned that, if America becomes a target, Israel will automatically be drawn into the conflict. Israel has since activated its Iron Dome, bolstered air defense positions, and placed its air force on maximum alert. Meanwhile, Iranian outlets continue hinting that an assault on Qatar would only mark the first phase of a broader campaign, potentially expanding toward Israeli or Saudi targets. Riyadh, for its part, has begun fortifying oil facilities along its eastern coast, fearing that Iranian missiles could cripple global energy supplies in a single night. Analysts from the Middle East Institute in London believe this economic vulnerability is precisely what China aims to exploit. A regional oil crisis would cripple Western economies, while Beijing, secured through long-term contracts with Tehran and Moscow, could ride out the turmoil with minimal impact. The Strait of Hormuz, located mere hundreds of kilometers from the U.S. base in Qatar, remains the most critical choke point in this unfolding drama. Roughly 30% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas flows through this narrow corridor. Should Iran attempt a blockade, analysts predict oil prices could skyrocket past $150 a barrel, potentially plunging the global economy into a deep recession. Bloomberg, citing internal data from major investment banks, confirms that insurance premiums for tankers transiting Hormuz have already surged by over 20%, a clear reflection of mounting global anxiety. The result is a region on the brink, a landscape filled with tension, mistrust, and shifting alliances. Iran, emboldened and strategic; China, patient and calculating; Israel and Saudi Arabia, alert and wary; and the United States, now facing one of its gravest regional threats in decades. As experts from the Atlantic Council aptly describe it, the current situation resembles a grand chessboard where every move carries global consequences. Each power calculates its next step with precision, yet the board itself is laced with hidden traps. Iran is betting that Washington lacks the will for another prolonged conflict. China is betting that America will stretch itself thin on multiple fronts. Israel and Saudi Arabia are betting that the US will intervene before chaos erupts. But history shows that when every player believes it can outmaneuver the other, one spark is all it takes. A single misstep, a single misread signal, and the resulting explosion could reshape not only the Middle East but the entire global order. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis informative, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow Insight Global for more in-depth coverage of world events and global power shifts.